Back in 1992, Jim Harte and I got a grant from the City of Rochester and the Reynolds Library Video Project. That was designed to make films recognizing the history and culture of Rochester. Well, as Dan mentioned, back in the 80s, we were roommates in New York City, and once while we were riding a subway train, I don't remember where we were going, but we're riding the train, and I said, "Jim, did you know Rochester had a subway?" And he didn't believe me. He thought I was like pulling his leg, but that was the first time Jim, I believe, ever heard about the Rochester Subway. And to make a long story short, Jim, while we met a girl, Teresa, in New York City, and it just turned out that she was from Rochester. So, jumping ahead to the 90s, Jim moves to Rochester and starts a family. And this whole concept for this grant came along. I had started Animatus Studio in '89, was about our third year. And we mulled around some ideas, what might be kind of interesting to do. And Jim was living on Ravine Avenue in the 10th Ward. I was living on Fairview Heights at the time in the city. And he was just a couple blocks from the open cut of the subway on the west end. So we had a lot of different ideas, everything from, well, I think we originally even talked about Rattlesnake Pete at one point back then, but we went ahead with the subway, and lo and behold, we got the grant. So we proposed a grant for a 15-minute documentary, and as some folks who work in the film business here realize, it's not always easy to get everything across in a short amount of time, and it ended up being 45 minutes. So a little bit longer than we had planned. But it turned out to be quite successful, and it was received very well from the city. And WXXI ran it 4 or 5 times, usually when they were trying to get members. And they would give away VHS tapes as a bonus for signing on. And then submitted it to the History Channel when a couple of years after they started up. And they were interested in it, and they showed it maybe 7 or 8 times over a 10-year period, mostly in the 90s. So it's got a pretty good track record. So we move ahead to 2005, and I guess about the spring or summer, Mayor Johnson said, well, I think it's time for us to decide what to do with the tunnel. I think we should fill it in. So there was a study to do filling in the tunnel of a cost of $20 million. I see a lot of thumbs down going up over here. So Jim and I started talking again about it, and I'd been pushing for a while, like, to move on and maybe do a DVD of the material. And then we said, okay, let's do it, and we came up with new ideas. There was an older gentleman, Don Espenmiller, who we interviewed. He was like one of 2 remaining operators of the subway, and we interviewed him. And Jim's going to discuss a little bit, you know, all these bonus features and stuff like that we added to it that you're going to see tonight. But I just thought it was a good idea to go ahead, let's get this out on DVD, let's talk about the subway going a little bit more here, and let's come up with a positive idea to do with this subway tunnel. So it was a good opportunity to go to the next format that's out there and to keep the discussion going about it. Jim and I don't really have any answers on what to do with it, but a lot of folks in town here that have had some different ideas, and it seems like it would be a real shame to fill it in. There are a lot of people that we want to thank, but I think we're going to show the film after Jim does a little bit of talking here, and then we'll do all our thank yous and introductions that way after the fact. So again, thank you so much for coming. I see a lot of friends and family, and it's really great. So without any further ado, here is my good friend and co-director on the end of the line, Rochester Subway, James P. Harte.
Again, thank you all for coming. My good friend and producer Fred Armstrong said I had to keep this under 5 minutes, so I was practicing this morning. I think I can do it in 4.5. Please forgive me.
I'll put money on it.
The motto of New York State is Excelsior, meaning still higher. Perhaps then the motto of tonight's program should be still below. What you're about to see is something that is gone but continues to exist as a reminder of a plan Rochester once had for itself. Midway between the Erie Canal and a drive to the mall, the Rochester Subway is the forgotten chapter in our local history. It was derided as an adventure in optimism, but adventure has always been part of the American character, and optimism has rarely been considered a vice. The builders of the Rochester Subway thought big. Through their own limitations and changes that they could not foresee, their enterprise failed. But they should not be mocked for trying. They were proud of their town, and this is their best expression of it. This was their Excelsior. And I think we need to ask ourselves, can we think of something better? First on our program tonight is the end of the line Rochester Subway. Aside from a few minor tweaks and higher resolution, it is the same film we made 11 years ago. We think it holds up pretty well as a story of who we are, where we live, and how we get there. For those of you seeing it for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who have seen it before, welcome back. Next is our version of something borrowed and something new. In 1950, Vitaly V. Yuzov made a master's thesis film at RIT titled The Rochester Subway. Our research has led us to the conclusion that the only print of this film is probably lost. But we did locate Mr. Yuzov, who gave us its soundtrack on 1/4-inch paperback tape. We made one copy of it before it disintegrated, and we used part of it at the beginning of the end of the line. Among the many films we did have access to was a 16mm color film made by Leslie Edgecombe and Robert Messenger of the Kodak Camera Club in 1956. Titled The Steel Wheel, it is a revealing and silent view of the subway in its final year. In an effort to present both these records of the subway, we have re-edited the soundtrack of the Rochester Subway to match the images of the steel wheel. The result is not strictly a preservation, but a representation of three filmmakers' visions of the subway as it existed in the 1950s. Our second extra feature is called Prodigal Son. Here we combine the story of Car 60, the only surviving passenger car on the subway, with the story of Don Espenmiller, one of the last men to work on the subway. After many travels, Car 60 has come home, and after many years, Mr. Espenmiller tells us the day-to-day realities of a railroader on the Rochester Subway. Our program concludes with Motherless Child, a visual poem of the subway's abandoned Broad Street tunnel. Accompanied by Philip Carley's piano score, we see what has remained hidden beneath our feet. Finally, we board the Phantom Run for a view of the subway that has never been seen, existing somewhere between history and mystery. There are a few other items that can be viewed at home, but for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride.
Well, first of all, Jim, why don't you wanted to do some thank yous to folks. You had a little thing you wanted to do there, right?
Yeah. Because as you can see, our credit list in our original production, sometimes we call it the world's longest credit list, but it's not even inclusive of all the people that helped us. We were just blessed with a wealth of physical material, the films, the artifacts, and also human talent, and it's just incredible. So some of the people that are listed here in the program, I'd just like them to take a stand and a bow if you're here. And Mike Boas from Animatus. Mike designed and authored the DVD and taught this old film editor a lot about how to do nonlinear editing. It was a tremendous amount of work. And
just if I could just interject here, Mike did all the menus that you'll see on the DVD. all the titles. He did a lot of the artwork for the cover, and he was just a huge help for this whole project, and this project would not be what it is without Mike. So special thanks to him.
David Poles, who is our chief DVD hawker in the back and artistic director for Animatus, and helped us on the original production and on the DVD.
The original cover. He's in the back selling DVDs. Sign him up.
Timothy Brown, are you still here or did you leave?
I never saw him.
He was here. He snuck out. Timothy, there he is. Stand up, stand up. That man carried a video camera through the entire Rochester Subway to get that last shot. Incredible.
It was a pretty tricky thing trying to light a black tunnel, a black hole, and we put the camera on a Steadicam, thanks to Brian Maslin, who might still be here. I'm not sure. Stand up, Brian. Maslin Digital. And it took us 3 attempts down there to get that whole tunnel run, and I want to thank Tim Brown. He did a great job, and he had a bad knee on the 3rd day, and we had all kinds of... it's pretty bad down there. You can see he had to walk over a pile of tires, and there's broken glass and stuff like that. So thanks for hanging in there, Tim.
I don't think any of our musicians are here tonight, but I wanted to thank Joe and John Dady, the Dady brothers, and Philip Carley, who did the original piano score for us. Also, he's not here tonight, but the man with the sunglasses, Carl Dengler, is a band leader. Some of his music's in there, and he's blind, but believe it or not, he was one of our best photo research experts. He remembered what's downtown before he lost his sight. I would be remiss if I didn't have one person here stand up who turned our 15-minute film into what it is today, and that's Mr. Tom Kern. Tom, would you please stand up? Tom was a 6-year-old boy. He saw the subway go by, and he retired. He pretty much devoted a big chunk of his life in preserving everything. It was with a little bit of a jaw-dropping that we saw his virtual subway museum in his basement. He did the artwork, and
all the drawings, the colored paintings were Tom's. And this film would not be what it would be, what it is today without Tom, because he helped give us the heart, and we thank you very much, Tom.
And Mike Champlin, are you still here? Mike, stand up. Mike did the avid editing on our project, the original. When we finally came into the editing booth, we had not a penny left, and we had this thing stitched together with fishing line. Mike really helped us put it together to be what it is today.
We almost didn't have sound effects on it, and we were at a point where we didn't know what to do, and Mike said there's no way you can do this without any sound effects in there. So he saved us on that, and when we left the edit on the original 12 years ago, the birds were chirping, and we were supposed to deliver the piece by noon, and we had an original screening at the little theater, so we were sweating bullets, but he got us through there. Thank you, man.
Could you just ask anybody else that might have forgotten, that anybody else that worked on this film, would you please stand up? Is anybody?
Bruce, we got Bob Watson helped us, Bruce Leach. I know there's other people here that helped us on this. Tom Holt. Tom Holt, yes, we need to mention Tom.
Tom Holt, yeah, I don't think Tom is here. He was supposed to. He's there. Tom, stand up. Tom is a very big part of the reason we're here tonight. You'll see. The Rochester Subway closed in June 1956, the same month that Rava opened. And sometimes I think it's because Tom needed something else to do after the subway closed. You'll see that you know, came to Rochester in '54, and Tom, the story you tell, it reminds me of coming to Rochester many years later and discovering this thing, and the club-like atmosphere that he discovered on the subway. I'm sure he had a great part in creating, and he certainly is our founding member of RAVA, and a big part of tonight's evening. So thank you very much, Tom. Any of you that have ever ridden the subway, you helped us, everybody else. If there's anybody that we've forgotten, we apologize. We thank you all for coming here tonight.
I want to thank my family. What? Oh, Mr. Edgecombe.
Oh, Mr. Leslie Edgecombe. I'm sorry. Mr. Edgecombe was the original. He was making films about the subway long before we did. Mr. Edgecombe, thank you very much. It's still real.
I don't think I was born yet. Sure. Who else did we forget? Well, we'll get to them in just 1 second. I just want to thank my family and my mom for showing up, and my wife and kid and my in-laws. And I know Jim's mother came in by train from New Jersey, right?
Now, there's that spirit coming up by train to see her son's Subway movie. And I want to especially thank my wife, Teresa, the reason I'm in Rochester, and the reason I exist. Thank you, Teresa.
We'll be glad to answer some questions. I think Dan has a microphone, and he can run around and maybe. Yeah, how many people actually rode the subway? Why don't you stand up? Wow. Well, that's pretty impressive. How many were in any of the films? I know that gentleman in the back was a little boy. That man standing there was in the last run.
The kid picked on the subway with the lady with the red jacket was my mother. I was 12 years old, and she gave me a ride on it for my birthday, the 19th of June, 1956.
Very good. So who has some questions for us? We'd be glad to answer anything. Well, that's just great.
Yeah.
Over here we have somebody. Go ahead.
You made this documentary many years ago, 12 years or so. Can you provide some insight why the resurrection right now?
Well, mainly because they want to fill the tunnel in, and I think it's something that we really ought to address as a community before it's filled in and it's gone. I don't have any exact answers what should be done, but to spend $20 million to fill it in with dirt seems to be a little short-sighted, in my opinion. So.
For a bus parking lot for our new terminal downtown.
Certainly that's the issue, but I guess I'm looking for, is there a plan now for you folks in your group in this film now to generate a different type of energy or interest or direction?
Well, we're hoping that this will, get a little kick into what's going on here, because before the mayoral election, they were all set. It was supposed to start filling in December. Now, they've really quietly put a little moratorium on it until the new mayor comes in. So it's going to be up to the new mayor now. It's kind of dumped in his lap on what should be done. When they were running, all the candidates said, well, we should rethink this before we fill it in. As far as any concrete plans, I've heard nothing. But it's the early stages again. It's like this thing it's like come full circle again. So that's one reason that we wanted to get this out. Get the public dialogue going on it again. There is a local group called Chill to Fill, and they really were instrumental in putting a stop on this whole thing. So, that's an organization you can go online and find, and they're trying to come up with different solutions. There's been a lot of suggestions, everything from putting a section of the canal back in there and rapid transit. But so there's a group of people that really put the hold on it. It wasn't us. It was the Chill to Fill group that really put the kibosh on filling it right away. But they're not. I don't think the city's going to take a long time here. If they don't come up with some concrete plans, I think they're still going to fill it in. Sure.
Could I mention the web address for that?
Sure.
The web address for Chill to Fill is www.chilltofill.org.
Chilltofill.org.
Yeah.
We have a question back here. Thanks you guys for a nice subway ride. Did Timothy actually walk or run?
He walked.
I mean, it really seemed like it was pretty fast.
Well, we sped it up. We did some stuff in After Effects to give it this old look.
Yeah.
And it was, it's one thing to do a Steadicam shot in a building or something, but to go a mile and go over tires and railroad tracks and broken glass and hypodermic needles, I'm not kidding. It was not an easy task. So he made a great effort. Woman here, sure.
The first part, the end of the line, there was a picture of three. You mentioned something about Daniels. There were a picture of three men there. We recognized one as my brother-in-law's father. Whoever gave you that footage, did you have names of those three gentlemen?
That was the one with Harry Beach, and one was Daniels, and I don't know the third person.
Right,
we never found
Daniel
that out.
Di Clementi was the name of the person who we recognized. It's my sister. He was
On the
on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
It was very...
He always said he worked for them.
He always...
He worked for them.
Right, he told us he always worked for the line, and then so it was very nostalgic seeing him right there. And then he went to the bus company. So we have to tell my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law has no idea that his father's picture is in that.
Well,
so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes.
The conductor that gave his opinions and so on, what is his status now? Is he still alive?
You're talking about on the
Yes.
Guitar 60 piece.
Yes.
Yes, I was hoping he was going to be here tonight, but
I think he actually did start as a conductor.
That's
and then-
way back when.
Yeah,
I owe
he
him money
started in-
because, can I just tell you?
Yeah.
I owe him money because when I was 10 and 11 years old, in the summertime, I rode the subway every day. And my little dime wasn't really the right fare. And of course, he just enjoyed my company and so on. And I truly thought that my dime every single day, all summer long for the last 2 years, would save the subway. So, yeah, I had mixed feelings watching this film. It was really wonderful for me.
Well, thank you. That wasn't you or the motorman said they come back to pay the check.
no, Don was great. I was hoping he could make it tonight, but he seemed in pretty good shape back in the summer. Espen Miller.
Don Espen Miller. As far as we know, Don says there's one other gentleman that we have not had pleasure meeting that is still living who actually was a motorman on the subway.
Way in the back there?
You notice the kids along the track there, one of the greatest things for us kids to do was to run down, get on the tracks, and put pennies on the tracks to see how big they would flatten the penny out, and they look about the size of a $50.
Well, there's a few shots in this film, especially from the steel wheel that Mr. Edgecombe did, where you got the kids playing on the tracks and stuff like that, and that's kind of a dangerous thing to do, and a lot of people really do get
Mr. Edgecombe, we have a question for you. Mr. Edgecombe, we were wondering, who were those kids in the film when you and Mr. Messenger made that?
The red coats, you mean?
Yeah, the kids that are walking on the tracks and climbing.
Two of them were Bob's sons, Marshall and Gilbert. And Bob and his wife and the kids moved to Portland, Oregon several years ago. And Marshall and I believe runs a auto repair shop out there. He likes it when the weather's bad because then there's more car breaks.
You can tell him he's famous now. When I was always wondering from looking at the film, when did you start shooting? Did you shoot it over a compressed amount of time, or was it just that because the snow is there in some shots and then not in others? Did you stretch it over a long period of time, or just we have kind of mixed spring?
It was over a length of time.
Mm-hmm.
Bob shot those with the snow stuff, the snow scenes, all himself. And then he and I got together later after the snow melted and shot the rest of it. And we had the good offices of Eastman Kodak Company behind us. They supplied the film. They didn't know it, but they supplied it. Yeah, it was a fun project.
and probably the processing too, right? Yeah. Woo! Back in Kodak process film. Yes.
First, I just want to say thanks for having us tonight. I thought it was great, and good job on all your production work. The question I had was this. Several years ago, in fact it was the summer of 1996, I was down in Atlanta, Georgia to see the Summer Olympic Games. And they have a rather sort of underground bar and restaurant area of the city, which I got to walk through. Now granted, at the time it may have been really booming because there were so many tourists there that summer for the Olympic Games. And I heard somebody suggest this a while back, instead of filling it in with dirt here. What do you think of the possibilities of doing something like that for Rochester?
Well, if they had beer, I would go.
We were interviewed last week on WCMF with Brother Weeze and his gang. One of the guys is from Atlanta, and he was telling me about it before we went on. And he said, unfortunately, that's deteriorated a little bit down there. I don't know from it's not being used enough, but it's not what it was. But it certainly is an idea, like Fred has said. You know, in a city that it snows half the year, you know, and it's cold, you've got this underground thing. And we were just down there today being interviewed by Channel 13, and it's noticeably, even with no heat, it's noticeably less cold down there.
It was a little warmer than it was on street level.
So, before I forget, there's one person I really need to thank for this, and that's my friend of 25 years, Fred Armstrong, is Mr. He was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. It turned into 2 years. But, I mean, see, he knows every street, and sometimes I think he knows every person in Rochester. And after 14 years, I still have to ask him for directions. He's pretty mad at me when I do. But, I mean, this is really a testament to his heart and soul in the city of Rochester.
Well, thank you. You're pretty good yourself. I think that's it for the questions, unless there's somebody else. Yep, one here.
Car 60?
Yep.
They mentioned that it's not being repaired?
Well, that was from our original film. That's why we did The Prodigal Son, to show that it is back in Rochester at the New York Museum of Transportation, well, actually the NRHS end of the museum.
Down in Rush.
The Genesee Valley Railroad Museum. And they are slowly trying to restore it, but of course it costs a lot of money, so it's going to take a long time unless they get some benefactors. So it has been saved. That's one thing I do feel we kind of did with the first one, is to help maybe save that and get it back here. So
after you buy our DVD, send money down so they can finish.
That's right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night. Drive safe.
So, Mr. Harte, are you pleased with the crowd, the turnout?
I am very pleased with the turnout. It's what we expected and it's what we hoped for.
Good.
And excuse me, there's no cameras or recording devices allowed in this auditorium.
I see.
I'm sorry, I'll have to have security.
Well, speaking to
take
the
care.
banana and then...